What is the challenge issued to religious communities by our Holy Father? To adapt our services to the needs of the world today. That this may be done effectively, our Holy Father stresses 3 points. Number 1, a deeper, continuing spiritual formation. Number 2, a superior professional preparation. Number 3, cooperation amongst religious communities. It is a challenge which we dare not delay accepting. Speaking to the First International Congress of Teaching Sisters, held in Rome, September 16, 1951, Pope Pius said, "You wish to serve the cause of Jesus Christ and of his Church in the way that the world of today demands. Therefore, it would not be reasonable to persist in ways and forms that hinder this service or render it impossible. Sisters must be ready and go up to the level of professional training demanded by their office. They must be so well versed in all that young people are in contact with, all that influences them, that young people will not hesitate to say, 'We can approach Sister with our problems and difficulties. She understands and helps us.' Sisters, just for a moment, let us go back to our Holy Father's words to the 700 Mothers General and Major Superiors, of whom I was privileged to be one, assembled in Rome for the First International Congress of Religious, September 15, 1952. Pope Pius XII, the real innovator of renewal for sisters, said, "We ask you to conform courageously every time that your sisters and your own proper experience tell you that the moment has come to take into account with intelligence the present forms of life." And he goes on, "In the formation of your sisters for the work and for the duty that is theirs, show no narrowness, but be broad of vision. Whether it be in education, care of the sick, of artistic activity, or something else, the sister must have the feeling, 'My superior gives me a training which places me on a level with my professional lay colleagues in the world.'" Notice, sisters, that our Holy Father says, "We ask you to conform courageously." The significant word there is conform. Had our Holy Father said reform, how we would have fallen over one another in our eager assent. There is glory in being a reformer. But conform? We hesitate. We are afraid of the word. We think of St. Paul's warning, "Be not conformed to this world," in Romans 12:2. Well, dear sisters, just as we are in the world, but not of the world, so also must we be conformed for the world, but not to the world. What we need is the courage to conform as well as to renew. What we need is to recognize the Pope as our only accredited challenger to change. It saddens Sister Catherine deeply to hear of any sister or any community boldly challenging the authority of the Pope or the Sacred Congregation for Religious, even when they looked to some will-go-it-alone communities as narrow and ill-informed. God never promised us perfect or even sinless ecclesiastical superiors. Stay with the Church, she would urge us, and you will stay with Christ. We have his own word for this. Humanly speaking, Sister Catherine was a person who should not have been allowed to grow old. Mentally, she did not. But the endless energy and enthusiasm she put into her work and the almost unbelievable accomplishments of her 10 years as visitatrix finally took their physical toll. She used to say to close friends, "I really have no patience with people who hang on to authority so long that when they finally leave it, they are too old to adjust to a less demanding but still useful assignment. Pray that our Lord, who gave me the duty of visitatrix, will relieve me of it through the same channels of authority. Then, if I don't offer my own opinion, but depend upon him to act, I can truly say, consummatum est, for just as I came in through the door of obedience, I want to leave by the same door. Those of us who loved her strictly because she was herself did as she asked, prayed that God would lift the burden from willing shoulders that had never asked why when obedience spoke. But her physical frailty asked relief for her more eloquently and urgently than words could ever do. Intellectually, she was as alert as she had been at 60, but the physical slowdown became too apparent to ignore. Early in November 1962, Sister got a letter from Paris thanking her for her services and happily congratulating her on her release from the burden of this office. She waited, symbolically, for Thanksgiving Day to tell her closest friend. The news was made public to the province during the annual retreat of all the sister servants of the province in January. On January 29, 1962, her successor, Sister Mary Rose McPhee, was installed. No one in the entire province was happier or more pleased with the appointment of Sister Mary Rose than Sister Catherine herself. She told me with her stunning blue eyes shining, "I prayed for this for 2 years." She left almost immediately, without a tear in her eye, for Los Angeles, where she was to rest for several months before taking up an assignment as Province Director of Vocations in Chicago. The sister servant of St. Vincent Hospital, Los Angeles, Sister Fidelis Klein, was a longtime friend of Sister Catherine. She had been on mission at Charity Hospital, New Orleans, while Sister Catherine had been at Carville. Insofar as she could manage it, she gave Sister Catherine the earth with a golden fence around it. And this was a personal joy to Sister Fidelis herself, even more than to Sister Catherine, because Sister Fidelis knew how to love unobtrusively and to give of material comforts in the same way. She wept the day that Sister Mary Rose, visitatrix, came to take Sister Catherine to Chicago with her. Sister had improved a great deal, but doing nothing, she often said, made her feel that she was on another planet. It was not for long that she did nothing. She set to work building up, so that the day after she arrived in Chicago, her typewriter was clacking away. With thoughtful kindness, and it is possible to be very kind without being the least bit thoughtful, Sister Mary Rose provided a sister secretary for her, and in no time at all, a flourishing business was going on at the office of the Province Director of Vocations. In the meantime, architects, carpenters, builders were at work on the top floor at Marilai Provincial House, transforming it into a new series of offices, conference rooms, waiting rooms, etc., for the vocation office. 'Twas the night after Christmas when Father Dolan, spiritual director of the province, led a procession for the ceremony of blessing what Sister Catherine quickly christened the Daughters of Charity Information Office. And what a beautiful, functional series of tastily furnished rooms they were. Just above us were the spires of Marillac, the architecture circa 1910. Sister Catherine christened for short the entire top floor given to us as the towers, and we used to kid each other about being the two princes, wanting to have our heads cut off. But there were more than just the two of us. Sister Catherine had as her confidential secretary, Sister Lois Douglas, and a lay secretary. I had Sister Mary Sheehy as assistant and Mrs. Georgia Casey as secretary. It would be difficult to say which was the fastest at taking dictation and transcribing. All were perfect and put out an extraordinary amount of work each day. Since Sister Catherine's office faced mine, we practically faced each other at work and held frequent conferences about our joint enterprises. Only God knows and understands what it means now to look at a closed door down a short corridor and realize what a cross He has offered in recompense for almost 52 years of constant, around-the-clock companionship that was never allowed to interfere with work. Sister Catherine, Princess Maud Summerfield, at long last had her own castle, complete with ramparts and towers. She divided the work as follows. She would handle the information services and edit the community's quarterly magazine. To me, she assigned all correspondence and interviews connected with candidates seeking admission to the community. Of course, there were odd jobs which we shared and other activities that grew out of the work, the motto of which was, "Make the community known," for no one can love what she does not know. Among the many contributions that Sister Catherine made to the community, not the least was the quarterly, which she created, using for the most part the talents in art and writing of the sisters of our own community, occasionally paying for a guest editorial to add variety. Her own editorials were the best part of the magazine. They were on every subject under the sun, and she used to get raves from her subscribers. These letters she always returned, answered by return mail. A sample of an editorial will show how sharp her mind was at 78 years of age. Time is for spending. Save time, save time. The words stare at us from print, blare at us from radios, glare at us from TV sets. We hear of 1-minute shaves, 2-minute cold cures, 3-minute cereals, 4-minute hair dyes, 5-minute car washes. The executive saves time by using an IBM machine. The housewife saves time by changing shopping centers. The teacher saves time by recourse to automatically scored examinations. Fine, fine. But where is this saved time? Is it deposited in a time bank, invested in time bonds, locked in a time vault? Can saved time be drawn on as needed? Can a week saved in winter be used to prolong a summer vacation? Can 30 minutes saved today be available tomorrow? Can a day saved at the beginning of the week be added to its end? Wake up to the fallacy of saving time. We don't save it, we spend it in some other way. For time is for spending. We not only can't save time, we must spend it. We speak of spending time just as we speak of spending money. I spent the weekend with my daughter, or I spent a month in California. But the words do not carry the impact of I spent $225 for a suit. I spent $3,000 for a car. We pause, think, and weigh before spending our money. Why not pause, think, and weigh before spending our time? For time is the stuff of which life is made. It is all a matter of values. We spend both time and money for that which we value most, balancing one against the other. But there is one all-important difference between spending money and spending time. Our money is our own, to spend wisely or foolishly, and if we lose it, the loss is temporal. But time is given to us by our Creator for a definite purpose from which we are not free to deviate. Time is given us to purchase an eternity of happiness. With His life, like a thing that He can spend, see Him run, and what will He have for His bargain at the end, when it's done? Think less of the impossible, saving time. Think more of the imperative, spending of time. Get a bargain, buy heaven. And An exquisite vignette is her editorial on Let Us Wonder. I wonder. Wonder is a good word, an intransitive verb of Anglo-Saxon origin. Its derivation is lost, save perhaps to some few scholarly delvers in semantics. We use it half a dozen or more times a day. We wonder if the plane will be on time. We wonder if our new hat will be becoming. We wonder if our friend will call today. There just does not seem to be a substitute for wonder. Try it yourself. Compare it with other verbs. Do you intend to do something? Any one of half a dozen other words will do. You can hope, plan, wish, desire, or want without ever consulting a thesaurus. Now, the striking thing about wonder, the wonder of it, so to speak, is that the meaning of the verb wonder is so totally divorced from the meaning of the noun wonder. To wonder and a wonder could well have come from different roots. It's worth some research. Yet how different life would be for each of us if we really wondered. Wondered in the same sense that we were amazed, confounded, astonished, awed. Wondered as we would in the presence of some marvels, phenomena, prodigies, or miracles, as indeed we continually do. A century ago, the American philosopher of sorts, Ralph Waldo Emerson, wrote, "The world will never perish through lack of wonders, but it will perish through lack of wonder." Since then, prescinding from nature, which is one great wonder shouting the praise of its creator, how man-made marvels have come to be a part of our daily lives. But the wonder of them was evanescent. We wonder if the plane will be on time. While waiting, we casually look at our watch, purchase something from a vending machine, glance at the headlines of a paper, all in themselves wonders of construction, automation, and communication. We search the skies for the incoming plane with no least sensation of wonder as we see a great mass of metal defy the laws of gravity to perform feats that put to shame the magic carpet of our childhood days. It has, we know, soared over mountains and plains at a speed of hundreds of miles an hour, guided by delicate instruments, kept continuously in touch with ground-based persons, and is now gliding gracefully to the end of a 1,000-mile trip exactly on schedule. "It's on time," we exclaim. "Look, I see Bill and Jessie." Something within us that might have come alive dies a-borning. We wonder if our new hat will become us. Only the mirror can tell. We don the hat, look closely at our reflection, tilt our head this way and that to catch the effect. If we turn it a fraction to the left, give it a slight upward tilt, there, that's perfect. The mirror also reflects that marvel of marvels, the human head. During the process of trying on a new hat, have we wondered about that? Wondered at the delicate mechanism of the eye, more complicated than that of a Leica camera, which enables us to see? Did we wonder at the intricately convoluted labyrinth of tissue, nerves, muscle, and bone that enables us to detect the breathing of a baby, to hear the howling of a lusty gale, that brings us to the sound of a symphony or the friendly ring of the telephone? Above all, did we wonder at the awesome contents of our cranial cavity, cradling our brain, center of our nervous system? That amazing organ performs functions with a precision and speed unmatched by any IBM machine. As we looked into the mirror, did we wonder that somewhere and somehow, intimately involved with a mass of gray tissue, is the material human source that makes us what we are, that enables us to think, judge, act, that makes it possible for us to walk and talk, to communicate with our fellow man, or find companionship in solitude? It is beyond our comprehension, but we can wonder. We wonder if our friend will write today, meanwhile continuing our knitting as we watch for the postman. Suppose we wondered about friendship itself, traced back to its origin, how much there is to wonder about the chance meeting that led to our acquaintance. Was it not something seemingly inconsequential? Then followed the slow ripening of acquaintance into friendship, as marvelous as the miracles of nature, the blooming of a rose, the ripening of a peach. Oh, the richness that friendship has brought into our lives and the confidence it has engendered. We may or we may not receive a letter from our friend today, but the wonder of friendship does not depend upon a postman's pause. The world is filled with wonders, but not with wonder. One can appreciate the simplicity of a saint who cried out in ecstatic bewilderment, "Oh, God has created a world. Come and look at it. A star-filled sky, a fruit-laden tree, the glory of a sunset are wonders. How long has it been since we looked at them? I wonder." Space allows us room for just one more of these editorials, which really should be published in a volume of their own. How much more inspiring than so many newspaper editorials. This one, it seems to me, is Sister Catherine herself, for she never stopped marching until 2 weeks before her death at 82. It's entitled March. March, March, March. Appropriately enough, the third month of the year, deriving its name from the god of war, Mars, has in our language a militant ring. March. The word conjures up a vision of soldiers in military array, moving in perfect unison towards a determined goal. Heads up, eyes front, chest out, purpose in every movement. It is rather a pity that Julius Caesar transferred March from the first to the third month of the year, because March expresses so well the spirit with which we face the beginning of a new year. March, all of us are soldiers, having been made members of the church militant at the baptismal font. Our line of march was determined for us by our Creator. The great business of life is to follow that line, embrace its obligations, shoulder its responsibilities, discharge its obligations. Life derives its meaning from the way it is lived. The central source of man's dignity is that God created each of us for something. The only successful life is that which is lived in accord with God's plan. In this sense, only those who are saints live truly successful lives. Now, before this is dismissed as preposterous, let's remember first that everyone in the state of grace is a saint. Secondly, that sanctity manifests itself in a variety of ways, as wide as life itself. For instance, consider the saints that are presented to us by the Church in March for special veneration. Immediately there comes to mind Our Lady of the Annunciation, the saint of saints, privileged to be mother and virgin. Almost equally familiar is Saint Joseph, the Jewish layman preserving virginity in his state as workman. Saint Patrick, the Romano-British missionary whose name is a synonym for the country he made Christian. And Saint Louise de Marillac, French woman of noble lineage, who was wife, mother, widow, and co-foundress of a religious community. But let's take a look at some other contrasting saints. Saint Thomas Aquinas, the most learned doctor the Church has ever known, is honored on the same day as is Saint Paul the Simple, so designated naturally and supernaturally. Saint Benedict, founder of Western monasticism, led a vastly different life than did Saint Casimir, son of the King of Poland and now first patron of that nation. Saint Felicita was a slave of a noble Carthaginian matron. All social barriers were swept away by their martyrdom through their love for Christ. Saint Dismas, the good thief, canonized by our Lord on Calvary, is in great contrast to Saint Euphrasia, the child bride of Christ. Joseph of Arimathea, who came to Christ by night, did not have the staunch outspokenness of Gregory the Great, which made him withstand an emperor for the preservation of the church's integrity. Saint Frances of Rome, widow, who through her holiness was given the title of First of the Citizens of Rome, followed a very different path of sanctity than that pursued by Saint Colette, accused by the public of being a fanatic and even a sorceress in her efforts for greater sanctity as a Poor Clare nun. The point is that neither learning nor the lack of it, princely position nor poverty, marriage nor virginity, made the saints saints. The essence of sanctity is the doing of God's will. The great business of life is to ascertain by prayer, counsel, and earnest thought in what state God wills us to serve him. Having prudently determined that, we must proceed courageously, not procrastinating, not yielding to disappointment because the particular state does not fit into our preconceived idea of it. Why does 1 out of every 4 marriages in the United States end in divorce? Why do girls, after thinking of the religious life for years and having taken counsel and accepted guidance, return home after a short term as postulant or novice? Because I didn't think it would be like this. The Magi set us a good example, coming with their princely retinues, bringing rich gifts to a newborn king, guided by a magnificent and mysterious star. They expected their journey to end in a palace, amid pomp and grandeur. Instead, they were led to a stable and a manger, to an unknown couple and their unknown infant. Nothing at all was as they expected it to be. But their faith was unshaken. They adored the child. They gave him their gifts. Despite all strange and contradictory circumstances, they believed in the kingship of Christ. They became harbingers of it in their own countries. March. Whether we will it or not, we are marching. Time being a bandmaster, beating a relentless rhythm. March we must, from our first heartbeat to the last. It behooves us that our steps be in the right direction, our efforts expended purposefully, that our entire life is a fulfilling of the orders of our Commander-in-Chief. It is a temptation to include several other editorials, but the 3 chosen give adequate testimony to Sister Catherine's fertile imagination and many-faceted mind. What would make a 3-volume tome would be her letters, written to many and various people. They run the whole gamut of humanity, from Trappists to bishops in the clerical world, and in the lay world, from the former children of St. Rose's to the women, some now here near her own age, who had been nurses with her at Dallas, Waco, and St. Thomas Hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. And in the world of religious women, from mothers general to novices, whose directresses had suggested they write to her as a woman of wisdom who could and would help them with a personal problem. But to the sisters of her own community she gave first place. Any letter received today, if it were important, would have an answer within 2 days. Where a sister was weighed down with anxiety and doubt, Sister Catherine telephoned the answer, no matter how many miles intervened. Of course, these recipients of letters from Sister Catherine did not individually average more than 2 or 3 letters a year at most. But certain it is, if her letters were to be printed, They could not be contained in one volume. For Sister Catherine, letter writing was as truly an apostolate of delicate charity as was visiting the widow because of her husband in a tragic accident or visiting the sick in their homes or in hospitals.
I'm sorry.
For Sister Catherine, letter writing was as truly an apostolate of delicate charity as was visiting the widow bereft of her husband in a tragic accident or visiting the sick in their homes or in hospitals. Sister Catherine attended wakes of deceased relatives of the sisters as faithfully as she attended Mass on Sunday. Her relationships with people were always on a very personal basis. In the days when particular friendships were the bête noire of most retreat masters, religious superiors, and the subject of many spiritual writers, Sister Catherine never spoke of them. Once a sister said to Sister Catherine, "What do you think of these so-called particular friendships we hear so much about?" Airily, she quipped, "Particular friendships? Why, all of my friends are particular." One of Sister Catherine's most favorite people, as she would call it, was her personal physician, Dr. David B. Flavin. Sister never traded on personal friendship to get professional concessions. She always asked his permission for any extensive travel because she was a cardiac hazard. When Sister was going to Rome for the conferring of the red hat on Cardinal Ritter, she consulted Dr. Flavin. He looked grave. "You know you're not getting any younger, Sister, though you hold your own very well. I'll have to lay down a condition for your going. You may go on one condition, and that is, provided you take your personal physician with you." Dr. Flavin is almost abnormally busy, but work could wait while he and his wife went to Rome with Cardinal-elect Ritter and his by invitation only retinue to keep an eye on Sister Catherine's health. When I asked Dr. Flavin if I might include a personal letter or two from Sister Catherine, he launched on a eulogy of her subtle wit, the jokes they shared, and, as everybody knew her, rhapsodies of what a wonderful woman she was. When I came back to the original request, he hedged. "Sister," he said, "do you know where those letters are now?" I hazarded, "In your files?" He said, "No, they are in my special box in the bank vault. I go down there and read them sometimes when I need a lift. Nobody has a key to that box but me. Absolutely no one." I teased, "Are you leading up to saying no?" With real regret, but a kindly firmness, he said, "I'm afraid so. They're sacred to me, Sister." Dr. Flavin had served Sister Catherine for more than 30 years. I know that she counted Dr. David B. Flavin and Mrs. Flavin among her close friends. Another revered but informal friend is now dead, Monsignor John J. Butler. We venture that in heaven he will look kindly on one's pilfering just one letter to Sister Catherine and her answer, which summarizes so many of the works they accomplished together. Dear Sister Catherine, enclosed is the address which you wanted to read. As a matter of fact, you are the first to receive a copy. I know it doesn't come up to some of the gems of which you are capable yourself, but it is rather difficult to express in 10 minutes the tremendous dedication of 48 years. I find it just as difficult, even now, to express to you, my dear friend, the thoughts that flood heart and mind at such a time in my life. To say that it is a rare privilege to work with you personally and with the Daughters of Charity is a very mild statement indeed. We have certainly plowed through many a rough spot together, but on the other hand, we have shared a lot of joy. How does one say thank you for generosity, for understanding, for friendship through many years, except to say from the bottom of a very full heart, God bless you, now and always. Sincerely and gratefully in our Lord. A week later to the day, Monsignor received this response from Sister Catherine. Dear Monsignor Butler, life has its moments. Rare, unplanned, unpredictable. Such a moment was mine, dear Monsignor Butler, when I read your letter that accompanied the promised copy of your talk at the testimonial dinner recently tendered in your honor. Moments are utterly dissociated with years, so time stood still, or rather the past, present, and future blended into a three-dimensional picture in which I viewed our working together during the past 21 years. Vignettes stand out, just you and I in your office discussing certain immediately needed repairs to Guardian Angel settlement. A matter of only a few $1,000s, but it seemed awfully big to us then. And your termination of the interview by reaching into a drawer of your desk and passing me the amount needed with an almost apologetic remark, I happen to have it. Then the hurry-up necessity during World War II to establish a day nursery sent us both to exploring the possibilities of space at St. Philomena's. This will serve as a dining room, and these rooms as dormitories, and this for a playroom. Within days, Stella Maris Day Nursery was ready for applicants. Do you remember getting a telephone call from a newspaper reporter asking, who is this Mrs. Stella Morris that established the day nursery named after her? Most brilliant of all the vignettes is that of the Child Guidance Center of Our Lady of Grace, which came into existence solely because of your vision and of the acute need for it, and my desire to follow your leadership. Money was needed, we said, and personnel. We had neither. Like Peter and John when accosted by a beggar for alms, like the apostles also, we said, but what we have, we give you. Our knowledge of the need and the firm faith that if we make a beginning in the name of Christ, he who has begun the good work will perfect it unto the end. And so it was. How fitting that the financial returns from the testimonial dinner should go to the Child Center of Our Lady of Grace, your work of predilection. Nothing could have been more appropriate. Your speech is a masterpiece, dear Monsignor. As I read it, I marveled at its structure, its flashes of wit here, its subtle irony there, but withal its able expression of your affectionate gratitude for all of the persons who have worked so zealously and ably under your direction. Dear Monsignor Butler, I was joyously proud when I found my name amongst those you specially mentioned as your friends. But for the rest of my life I shall be humbly grateful that my name will be mentioned by you to your first friend, our blessed Lord, the source and model of all charity. Devotedly, Sister Catherine. We quote from Sister Catherine's letter to Father Miller, successor to Monsignor Butler as President of Catholic Charities of St. Louis. Dear Father Miller, I am rather glad that I was absent from the city when the announcement of your appointment as Director of Catholic Charities was made, because I prefer that my congratulations be not mingled with nor lost in the deluge of such notes and messages that you must have received. Director of Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of St. Louis is a tremendously important job, viewed from any angle. But it becomes awesomely portentous when one thinks of it in relation to the thousands of poor and needy of all kind, which become now your special charges. Yes, yours, Father, because no matter how well organized and administered an agency is, the final responsibility rests in the hands and heart of the one who holds the chief position. Yours the infant and the derelict, yours the dependent child and the still more dependent aged. Yours the juvenile delinquent and the struggling widow, yours the homeless and the hungry. Your assignment brings to full fruition your ordination as deacon, and may Stephen, Philip, Procrus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas assist you. I am sending to Paris some mass offerings for your intentions, dear Father Miller, and I am specifying that one mass be offered in the Sacred Heart Basilica at Montmartre, that the Sacred Heart of Jesus, of whose fullness we have all received, may impart a special degree of that fullness to you. Another Mass is to be offered at the shrine of St. Vincent de Paul in the Vincentian Mother House, that the patron of all charitable works may be ever mindful of you. Another Mass is to be offered at the shrine of St. Louise de Marillac in the miraculous metal chapel. Certainly she has had a special interest in you, dear Father Miller, ever since you were appointed assistant pastor in the parish dedicated to her. But in addition, I have a very special intention in that Mass at St. Louise's altar. It is that she will bless you with an understanding, sympathy, and tact in dealing with all religious women. Not a small boon, that. The fourth Mass is to be offered at the shrine of St. Catherine Laborie, that your happy relations with the daughters will ever continue. Sincerely. Sister Catherine's subtle concern for all religious women will not be lost on the reader. It was characteristic of her to love all the sisters of the world, and willingly would she have made any sacrifice for them. Chapter 10. Sister Catherine loved life. She did not want to die. She was not at all afraid of death. She often said she would gladly welcome it when the time came, but she was in no hurry for it to arrive. Life is so interesting, she would say, especially now when no one knows what's going to happen next. She had an unconquerable interest in everything. Baseball, for one example. She rarely, and only on a holiday, would follow the game on television or radio. But in picking up the newspaper for a rundown of the news each morning, she turned to the sports section to see first what the Cardinals were doing. And our space efforts. The astronauts were like brothers to her, and she often remarked that she prayed for their brave wives. She must have had all heaven watching the moon when we planted the flag there. She read the editorials and the columnists, agreed or disagreed out loud, and then with a salute to another new day, she would begin her morning's round of dictation at 8 o'clock until noon. Her secretaries loved her, and speaking of her unfailing sense of humor, they would say, "It's like reading a new and absorbing book every day, with each new letter dictated seeming like a new and exciting next chapter." But her abiding interest was the church and the religious life. She was delighted that all religious were experimenting in ways and means of how to get rid of the cobwebs that had accumulated around rules, customs, and once worthy but now outmoded traditions. But it disquieted her to see the secular forms some of the experiments were taking. She was a keen student of human nature, a loving and understanding one, but her last days were shadowed by what was happening to some communities due to what she attributed to a faulty reading and misinterpretation of the post-conciliar decrees. But one never heard a word of destructive criticism from her about priests or sisters. Simply she prayed for them. Nothing daunted her faith. It was just the suffering of the Holy Father and the turmoil in the church that disturbed her. But always the cheery words, "The church and religious will go on forever. Those who leave lose. Those who stay are the winners." Oh, sisters, she would add, let us pray very hard for the losers. Then, with a roguish smile and a twinkle in her eyes, she would implore, but don't ever say of them that they meant well. It is the one calumny or detraction I could never endure. Just imagine having "she meant well" inscribed on your tombstone. Sister's health was failing, as one might expect at her age, but from October through December she was in and out of DePaul Hospital with a back ailment that Dr. Flavin ascribed to stress. You want to work at 82, he said, as you did at 50. And no, it cannot be done. Sister Catherine came home from the hospital on New Year's Eve. She was very much her old self, saying that Dr. Flavin had condemned her to an armchair. Obedient as always, honoring the physician because we all have need of him, she took to reading again like a rocket to the moon. It was a restful period for Sister Catherine, but love is psychic. I said to her one day early in January, my premonitions never come true, no matter how strong they are, but I have a foreboding in my heart that we won't be together much longer. Always the spiritual optimist, she said, but think of the long years we've had together, and what wonderful years they were. Let us thank God for them. I do daily. And just think, we'll have all eternity together. And after a pause, she added, and let's make the most of the time we have left. This was the nearest she came to any mention of death. On January 24th, her breathing became labored, and she had to wear an oxygen mask almost 3 hours out of 4. When her difficulty in breathing abated, even for only half an hour, she would, of all things, read. On January 25, however, the breathing difficulty became very grave. Sister lost consciousness, and about 4 o'clock was rushed to DePaul Hospital in a dying condition. She was immediately placed in the cardiac intensive care unit. Sister nurses worked with her around the clock and managed almost miraculously to make her comfortable, so that she seemed at peace and free from pain. The morning of the day she died, I slipped into her room and whispered to her, "Sister, am I getting through to you?" She spoke my name and added a few words that will remain locked in my heart forever. Now that she is gone and her place knows her no more, I cling to the memory of those words to help me with whatever time is left ahead. As I left the room, her day nurse, Sister Esther Levin, followed me outside. "Sister," she said, "yesterday afternoon Sister roused from a sleep, opened her blue eyes to their widest, and as though she were greeting someone she loved, she said almost in her own, usually strong voice, 'Mamie, oh Mamie.' Then she smiled and lay back on her pillow." "Who is Mamie?" Sister Esther asked. I answered briefly, her favorite sister who died years ago. That night, with no struggle, just with a sigh, Sister Catherine Sullivan died, just 1 month from completing 60 happy years as a daughter of charity. At her own request, she was buried among the sisters at the next vacant place. She gave countless lectures to all sister audiences in an endeavor to help them to search their own souls, but especially to search between the lines of these vicious articles designed to delight the itching ears of the discontented and trouble souls that had hitherto rejoiced in their holy vocation. Of those articles that insisted rudely and crudely that sisters were no longer relevant to the church, she would ask her audience of sisters, "Who says we're not relevant? Name the expert who truly knows whereof he speaks." Our Holy Father, Pius XII, said what Paul VI repeated later: "The apostolate of the Church today is scarcely conceivable without the cooperation of religious women in works of charity, in hospitals, in schools, in assistance to the priestly ministry, in the missions. Yes, Sister Catherine insisted, without sisters to staff them, the vast majority of our schools, hospitals, children's institutions, settlements, day nurseries would close their doors. Almost every mail brings to me a plea for sisters for this or that work. We had 35 such requests this summer. We accepted one. And that, sisters, points up what a lost or a rejected vocation means. If a girl has a call to be a daughter of charity, and through cowardice, lack of generosity, or love of the world rejects it, it means something very much more than that one soul has missed the path of perfection to which she was called. It means that children who should have been instructed in the faith and kept close to our Lord and His Blessed Mother must attend secular schools from which even the name of God is banished. It means that the sick and dying do not have the aid of the sacraments and the comfort of their religion. It means that children deprived of a natural family life are deprived also of the love, affection, and understanding which God destined them to find in the hearts of sisters. It means that the poor and the friendless, and the needy and the discouraged have no one to show them how to sanctify their suffering, but must depend upon the cold, unfeeling charity of the state, which only too often embitters while it gives material help. Ah, yes, dear sisters, a person who is unfaithful to a religious vocation is like a person appointed to keep burning a lamp in a lighthouse, located by dangerous waters. If the keeper decides that he is tired or cold or bored or lonesome and deserts his post, what happens? The light goes out, and the ships that counted on its guiding light are dashed on the rocks and perish. Sisters, we can live our own life if we want, but we must also die our own death and face our own judgment. You know, sisters, she continued, some of us make far too much of the trials of community life, and we talk too much and too glibly about the sacrifices of a religious life. Someone has said that the exodus of mothers from their homes to offices and factories is due largely to they having heard their mothers complain about the drudgery of housework and a woman's work is never done, and they resolve not to be stuck with that. Perhaps the fewness of religious vocations can be attributed in a measure to the impression some of us give that the religious life is a slow and drab form of martyrdom. You have to get up awful early. Yes, millions of farmers and dairymen get up hours ahead of us and go out into a cold barn to milk 20 cows because their living depends upon it. You may be tempted to feel sorry for yourself because you have 52 children in a parish school. Do you ever stop to think, sisters, that there are lay teachers who teach as hard as you do all day and then go home and cook, wash, and look after a family and then prepare their lessons for the next day? Or you're in a hospital and you've been on night duty 2 months. Terrible, isn't it? Look out the window and see the poor policeman tramping the icy streets, or the pavements hot even at night in the teeming rain, and under the necessity of being always ready to risk his life at a moment's notice. Think of the watchmen who have spent years at the monotonous task of just watching, then go home to sleep and rest without a chance to get more than half acquainted with their wives and children. Or you are a student now. You have this and that class and this and that assignment. Many and many a girl in the world has to hold down a job while getting her education, and perhaps after a night class, getting home at 10 o'clock p.m., she has to cook and wash and get ready for her job the next day. Our blessed Lord promised us 100-fold, even in this world. He gives it. Let us at least be grateful. Let cheerfulness be our watchword. A good motto might be, As I once heard a sister with a pronounced southern accent say, "No mo moanin', Lord, no mo moanin'." And we might very profitably meditate on the words of a Baptist minister with an even stronger accent. You can't do as you pleases if you want to walk with Jesus. Sister Catherine took an avid interest in renewal after Vatican II had spoken through the documents and decrees of the Conciliar Fathers. These documents and decrees she could quote almost by heart, especially those that pertain to the religious life. Across the country she would speak to troubled communities as well as to our own. Come to think of it, this sensitive interest to all that concerned the church and religious life within its framework could very well compete as one of the greatest contributions Sister Catherine made to the church. Dear sisters, she would say, do not get frightened or confused about this changing world of which we hear and read from morning until night. The world has always been changing. It began changing in the Garden of Eden. Think that over. What a change for our first parents. It will go on changing until the final battle on the field of Armageddon, which Scripture tells us will signal the end of the world. In things that pertain to time, we must change with the world. In those things that pertain to eternity, we dare not change. Sister Catherine was all for controlled change that would revivify religious life, but she did not think the baby had to be thrown out with the bathwater in order to effect the changes we all know need to be made. Sister had a deep sympathy for those who acted like children that had been held down too tightly under maternal control, and then, when the heavy hand was lifted, went wild. And if we are absolutely honest, we will admit that. But perhaps this was not a greater disturbance to peace, harmony, and brotherly love than that made by pious obstinacy on the part of those who do not wish to make the tiniest change from worn-out, outmoded traditions that, if looked at with honest intelligence, no longer made any contribution, but rather served as obstacles to true community life. Ominously, these obstructionists predicted, give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Some did, as a matter of fact, take several acres. Who should be the arbiter? Certainly not the journalists we mentioned before, certainly not young priests who, sad to say, were heady with what they considered as their destiny to reform the church. Sister Catherine gave an answer to this question when she spoke to the 44th Convention of the National Catholic Hospital Association of the United States and Canada, as follows. We do indeed face the challenge of change, but a challenge connotes a challenger, and the challenge is important only in proportion to the honor, dignity, integrity, and power of the challenger. Who has thrown down the glove to us? Who, with the proper credentials of honor, dignity, integrity, and power, has thrown down the gauntlet to all religious of the world? Is it the state, licensing bureau, social agencies, educational accrediting groups, national and regional, the White House? No. The challenge, urgent, imperative, demanding, comes from the highest possible source. It comes from His Holiness, the spiritual leader and the teaching authority of the Church, the Vicar of Christ on earth, the highest superior of every individual religious. The challenge has been made by Him who is our first superior, to whom our vow of obedience is made, and to whom we owe absolute allegiance. Whoever repudiates Him repudiates Christ, whom He represents. We cannot be too deeply imbued with this truth, sisters, for accepting the Holy Father's challenge means change, adaptation, conformity, all in virtue of the obedience we owe to the Holy See. Sisters, it is trite, it is mouthing a cliché, to say that the world is changing. The world began changing in the Garden of Eden, changing violently, and it will go on changing until it reaches the field of Armageddon. But what is startling and peculiar to our era is that this is the first time in the history of the Church that its supreme head has urged communities to change, to adapt their mode of life and manner of service to the needs of the world as it is today. Dear sisters, whose voice but that of the Pope could have penetrated the hallowed halls of our mother houses, reaching into community council rooms to bring about modifications in constitutions, rules, and customs, while keeping the spirit intact? Whose hand but that of Christ's vicar could have cut away the dead word of tradition from each community tree in order that it might bear fruit more abundantly? No one else could have done it. No one else would have had the right to do it. His very title has a significant application to those of us who have renounced the world, and yet must work out our salvation by serving that same world. Our Holy Father has found the way. He built the bridge. How we need the security that derives from familiarity with his writings, addresses, directives, and allocutions. They should be used for spiritual lectures, for refectory readings, for discussion amongst us in study groups. Let us remember that every community came into existence to serve the Church, and it is axiomatic that where the Pope is, there is the Church. Sisters, do we sufficiently appreciate our great privilege in being a religious in this day and era? I have been a religious for more than 50 years, and I am ready to say to our blessed Lord, "Thou hast kept the good wine until now." Never before in the history of the Church has a supreme pontiff been so engrossed with religious communities. Never before has a pope issued so many instructions concerning religious and their way of life, or manifested such an affection for them. Once I was privileged to hear him say, in reference to the 1 million religious in the world, "Oh, that I had all those religious in my hands. I need them." Think of it, sisters. The Holy Father says he needs us. Does it not remind you of St. Paul saying, "The head cannot say to the hand, 'I have no need of you'?" Or shall we not rather think of the words uttered by our blessed Lord when preparing to make his triumphal entry into Jerusalem? He said to his disciples, "Go you into the city, there you shall find an ass tied and a colt. Loose them and bring them to me. If any man stop you, say that the Lord hath need of them." Yes, our Holy Father needs us, and let ours be the part of the humble beast of burden to carry him to his triumph, and ours. Oh, Calvary will loom, sisters, but Calvary is in itself a triumph.